In this episode 5 of Simplification, we're going to look at multiplying out a binomial by a binomial, and the instruction for one of these would be expand the product and simplify. So by expanding the product, with it being a binomial times a binomial, we have to remember the distributive law. So the distributive law basically says multiply every term in the one bracket by every term in the other bracket. So the easiest way to do that is with an acronym FOIL, and what we do is we multiply the first one in the one bracket by the first one in the other bracket. So that stands for first. Then we multiply the first one by the other one in the other bracket. And if you look, this is on the outer side and that's on the outer side. So we say multiply the outers together. And then we've multiplied this 4 by everything. So we're now going to go to the 3. And we're first of all going to multiply the 3 by the 2x. And that's an inner one and an inner one if you look at their positioning. So that would be the I of FOIL. So we multiply the inners together, and then the 3 has to also be multiplied by the other one in the other bracket, and that's the last one in this bracket multiplied by the last one in that bracket. And so that's how we say FOIL, and that's the easiest way to remember what we have to do. So let's do that with the first one. So in doing FOIL, we eliminate the brackets. So we're saying 4x times 2x is 8x squared. Be careful of your signs. We're going to be saying this term minus that term, so positive times negative. 4x times 7 will be 28x. Then we go into the inners. They're both positive. And I've got 3 times 2x. And then going to the last, I've got positive times negative. 3 times 7 is 21. So if I look at that, it looks pretty well expanded. Is it finished? Well, the last thing I always have to remember to do is to look for like terms. So I've got an x squared term. There's no other x squared. I've got an x term and an x term. So those are like terms. And then I have a constant with no other constant. And this is what will happen if you multiply it out in that order. If there is going to be anything that can be added together, they're going to be your outers and your inners. So I've got 8x squared, negative 28 plus 6. Remember, it's going to be something x. So negative 28 plus 6 is going to give me negative 22x. And then my negative 21, my constant, is just going to remain as it is. And you can see now that my answer is in descending powers of x. And that will be the trinomial that has been created from multiplying this binomial by another binomial. Let's have a look at the one on the right-hand side and see what happens with that. So doing the same thing, first, I'm going to get 30ac. Then my outers, I'm going to be multiplying those two, so I'm going to get positive 12AD. Then my inners, these two, I'm going to get positive 15BC. And then my lasts, I'm going to get 6BD. Right, so there's quite a lot of variables going on here. I've got 4 different variables. What I need to do now is to check to see if any of them are like terms, in other words, ones that have got the exact same 2 variables, and it's different every time. So those are 4 unlike terms, and therefore I can't simplify it any further, and that would be my final answer. So the way to spot something like that happening is you don't have this situation where they both start with an x term and then they both got a constant. They've got the same type of configuration. Here I've got an a variable and a b variable, c variable, d variable, and it's in this situation that you're going to end up with no or maybe very few like terms. So let's put all of this together now, and let's look at a binomial times a binomial minus another pair like that. So we're going to have to do quite a bit of work before we can start adding up at the end to get the final answer. So this I'm going to do with FOIL, and that I'm also going to do with FOIL. So first is going to give me 6a squared, outers, positive times negative, just always be careful of the signs, is going to give me 14a, positive times positive, 3a, and positive 1 times negative 7 will be negative 7. So here, I've got to be very careful because this minus sign outside the bracket is going to affect my whole answer that I get from multiplying these two together. So when this situation happens, I would suggest you write minus and you put your answer. So your answer is going to look something like this, but you put that in there first and then you sort out the minus sign afterwards. There are people who jump straight from this step to this step here, but then you've got to be somebody who is very, very careful, very, very accurate, and yeah, is able to process things quickly and not make silly mistakes. So if you want to be safe, do what I'm doing now. So the answer to this binomial times binomial is going to be 6a times a. Then my outers, 6a times negative 9. 4 times a, and my lasts 4 times negative 9. Okay, so now I'm going to write all of this down as it is. And now I'm going to multiply the negative into every single term in the bracket. So negative times positive, negative times negative, or just remember when you're multiplying a negative into a bracket, all the signs change. So I chose just to get completely rid of the brackets first before I started looking for like terms. At this stage, if you'd wanted to, you could have worked out the negative 14 plus 3 and just written that answer down there because they are like terms. There's so many ways of doing different things at different stages, as long as everything you do is mathematically correct. So for teaching purposes, I've chosen to just get rid of the brackets completely, and now I'm going to look for like terms. So I've got a squared terms, then I've got quite a lot of a terms, and then I've got constants. So I'm going to start with my a squared terms. 6a squared minus 6a squared, anything minus itself is 0, and we don't write the 0 down. What actually it means now is that my a squared terms have disappeared. I don't have that kind of like term anymore. So 6a squared minus 6a squared, 0, they're gone. Now I need to look at all my a terms. So negative 14 plus 3 is going to give me negative 11. Negative 11 plus 54 is going to give me 43, and 43 minus 4 is going to give me 39a. Remember, I was just talking about all the numbers, but they're all a terms, and so when I've processed the coefficient part, the number part, then I need to write a next to that answer. And then looking at my constants, I've got negative 7 plus 36, which means the same as 36 minus 7, which is going to be 29. So even though at some stage I had a squared terms as well, my final answer has come out to simply have an a term and a constant.